The Height Family Massacre, the son who destroyed everything, the shocking family tragedy. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss the shocking true stories that haunt our world. Like this video if you're ready to dive deep into the case of the Heights family and the heartbreaking tragedy that no one saw coming. It was the early hours of August 25, 2008, when Linda Height made a desperate 911 call that would forever haunt not only her, but everyone involved. The call began with fear, confusion, and the sound of someone fighting for survival. "I can have 911. Help, please," Linda's voice trembled through the line, her words barely audible as she gasped for air. "Shot. I'm shot. Where you at?" "I don't know," she continued, her voice trailing off, filled with pain and fear. It wasn't just Linda in trouble. Her husband, Philip Height, and their son, Carrie, had been shot too. It was a night that began with typical, peaceful family moments and ended in unimaginable horror. The Heights had been a respected family in Effingham County, Georgia, the epitome of what every family aspired to be: hard-working, community-oriented, and full of love. But in the blink of an eye, their world turned upside down. Philip Height, a man born in 1948, was the cornerstone of his family, a man of integrity, faith, and grit. He had spent 20 years serving in the Georgia National Guard and later built a successful real estate business. Known for his generosity and commitment to his community, Philip was admired by many. His work ethic and values made him a well-respected figure in the town, but above all, his pride lay in his family. It was in the 1960s at a local Savannah fair that Philip met Linda, a woman whose beauty and grace captivated him from the start. Their love story blossomed into a lifelong partnership. The couple married young, and for over 4 decades, their marriage became a symbol of commitment and loyalty. They built a home, a legacy, and raised 3 sons, Craig, Chris, and Carrie, who, together, made up the picture-perfect family. If you looked at old photos of the Height family, TSA's family, you would see a smiling, happy family captured during Christmas or at family gatherings. Linda and Philip beaming proudly in the center, their sons at their sides, looking every bit the part of a wholesome, faith-driven family. Their middle son, Chris, stayed out of the limelight, preferring a quieter life, while Craig, the eldest, was active in his father's real estate business. Carrie, the youngest, loved spending time with his kids and enjoying the outdoors. He seemed to have it all: a devoted wife, children, and a life full of love. But behind the idyllic picture lay an impending storm. By the summer of 2008, the Heights had no idea that their once perfect world would soon be rocked by betrayal. For Linda, waking up that fateful morning and realizing she had survived something so horrific was the first sign that their family's history was about to take a drastic, terrifying turn. The scene the police encountered at the Height home was something no one could have anticipated. When they arrived, they found Philip lying lifeless in the master bedroom, a single gunshot wound to his head. His body remained under the covers, as if he had been trying to shield himself from what was coming. The house, once full of love and laughter, now stood as a cold, empty shell. Carrie was in critical condition, fighting for his life, and Linda, despite being severely injured, was somehow able to crawl to the phone to make the heart-wrenching 911 call. She had survived, but the family she knew and loved would never be the same again. The question that everyone asked, and that still echoes through the years, was who could commit such a brutal act against a family that seemed to have everything? The investigation would reveal secrets hidden beneath the surface, and soon the Heights' perfect family story would unravel, leaving behind a trail of pain, loss, and unanswered questions. The unraveling of the American dream. The investigation into the Heights family tragedy began with the kind of questions that every detective dreads. Why, and how could this happen? The family that had once been the picture of Southern grace and community respect now lay shattered. A mother and son clinging to life, a husband dead, and a family name forever tarnished. But what had caused such a horrific turn of events? As law enforcement began their work at the Height home, they uncovered a scene that was both tragic and chilling. Philip Height, the patriarch, had been shot in his bed, a single bullet wound to the head. His body, found under the covers, seemed almost peaceful, but the reality of his death was far from peaceful. Investigators believed that Philip had been awake when the attack occurred, and given the position of his body, It appeared he had looked into the eyes of his killer in his final moments. In another room, Cary Height lay on the floor, gravely wounded but still breathing. He was taken to the hospital, where doctors feared for his survival, but against all odds, he survived the night. Linda, though badly injured with gunshot wounds to the neck and face, managed to crawl to a phone and make a 911 call that would forever haunt everyone involved. Linda's voice, filled with panic and pain, had barely been audible when she reported the shooting. "I'm shot. I don't know," she had said, struggling to explain the gravity of the situation. In that moment, she wasn't just a mother and wife, she was the lone witness to a tragedy that no one could have foreseen. The Heights, once the ideal family, had been torn apart by an act of unspeakable violence. As Linda covered in the hospital, the investigation shifted into full gear. Detectives started speaking with those closest to the Heights family, friends, relatives, and anyone who might have had insight into the family dynamic. The first round of interviews did not produce any glaring answers. There were no obvious motives, no signs of a strained relationship, and no known enemies. But as the days passed, more details began to emerge. The family's outwardly perfect image hid cracks that would soon be exposed. Linda's son, Craig Height, had been embroiled in a bitter argument with his father, Philip, just days before the shooting. The tension stemmed from a long-standing family issue, Craig's extramarital affair. Philip, a man of strong moral convictions, had confronted Craig about it. The confrontation was heated, with Philip making it clear that if Craig didn't end the affair, there would be serious consequences. This was the first crack in the seemingly flawless family facade. Craig felt humiliated by his father's intervention, and his anger had festered. Reports from friends and family members revealed that Craig had become increasingly hostile toward his father in the weeks leading up to the murder. In one conversation, Craig had allegedly warned, "My dad and Cary better watch themselves, or I'll go old school on them." But despite the tension, no one could have imagined that Craig would take such drastic action. The night of the murders, investigators learned that Craig had used a hidden spare key to enter his parents' home after dark, a key that only immediate family members had access to. He went to the house armed and with clear intent, and the devastation that followed would haunt the community for years to come. As police pieced together the events of that fateful night, the truth began to unravel. Linda and Philip's once perfect life had been shattered by betrayal, greed, and unresolved family conflict. But the investigation was far from over. In the weeks that followed, new revelations would surface, and the truth of what happened in that quiet home on August 25th would come to light in a way no one could have anticipated. The final truth and the fall of a family. As the investigation into the Height family murders continued, the truth about the horrific night began to surface. The evidence was mounting against Craig Height, but the full scope of his actions and the motivation behind them would soon be revealed in a way that sent shockwaves through the community. Detectives discovered that Craig had arrived at the Height home late on the night of the murders, armed with a gun. He had entered through the back door using the spare key that only family members knew about, slipping into the home undetected. The family's once tranquil life would soon be shattered forever by a single act of violence. The murder of Philip Height was swift and cold. Philip, lying in bed, was shot in the head. He had likely been awake when the attack happened, and his final moments were spent looking into the eyes of his own son, a thought that haunted the investigators and left them grappling with the incomprehensible nature of the crime. Cary Height, hearing the gunshots and realizing what was happening, rushed to the scene, but he too was shot, although his injuries were not immediately fatal. Linda, badly wounded but determined to survive, crawled to the phone and made that harrowing 911 call. Her words would go down in history as a chilling testament to a mother's strength in the face of unimaginable pain. Her husband, the man who had provided for her and their children, was gone. Her son, the boy she had raised, had turned into a killer. The family she knew and loved had been torn apart in a single night. But the investigation wasn't over. As detectives pieced together the evidence, they began to understand the true nature of the conflict within the Height family. Craig's affair had been the final straw in a series of events that had left him seething with resentment. Philip's confrontation with his son had been the catalyst, but there was more to the story, more anger, more betrayal, and a simmering rage that finally boiled over. Craig's actions had been cold, calculated, and devastating. But even as investigators closed in on him, they struggled to comprehend the depth of his betrayal. The Height family, once admired by everyone in the community, had fallen apart under the weight of their own secrets. No one could have imagined that a son could commit such a brutal act against his own family, against the very people who had loved him unconditionally. As the investigation continued, the community of Effingham County was left to pick up the pieces. The shock and disbelief surrounding the murders left a scar on the town, and the once legendary Height family name would forever be associated with tragedy. No amount of good deeds, no matter how many lives Philip had touched, could undo the horrors of that fateful night. Craig was arrested, tried, and convicted for the murders of his father and brother. The court proceedings were tense, and the grief of the surviving family members was palpable. The truth of what had happened that night was finally laid bare, but the pain of the loss would never fully heal. In the years that followed, Linda's life was forever altered by the events of August 25, 2008. She would never be able to forget the sound of her son's voice as he shot her husband and brother. She would never forget the pain of surviving a night of horror that no one should ever experience. And though she had lived through it, she would never be able to fully understand the depths of her son's betrayal. But Linda survived, as did Carr, who eventually recovered from his injuries, both physically and emotionally. The two of them were left to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives, haunted by the tragedy, but determined to rebuild, piece by piece. The Height family's legacy, once built on love, faith, and hard work, would never be the same. It had been torn apart by betrayal, greed, and the brutal actions of one of their own. But the story of the Heights would live on as a cautionary tale, a reminder that even the most perfect of families can be destroyed by the darkness that lurks beneath the surface. If you've been following the Height family's tragic story, make sure to subscribe, like, and share this video to help us continue uncovering real-life mysteries. Your support means the world, and together we can shine a light on these dark stories.